So we talk about Pakistan, and you talk about the main infrastructure building blocks. And what do we mean? Infrastructure is such a broad term, but fundamentally, what do we mean? We mean energy, we mean logistics, transport, we mean financial services, we mean data platforms, we need IT, we need agriculture, we need water management systems. Those are the building blocks of agri spaces, as well as broad infra spaces. And a lot of those are represented on this panel, which is phenomenal. But there's a big elephant in the room when it comes to talking about sustainability. And we heard Amir talk about it's expensive. It's also the cost of inaction that actually we are not considering. And the big elephant in the room is this, that while other countries can talk about the fact that we don't want to discuss these things and they're parked on the side and this is not part of the agenda, the climate elephant is actually stamping all over our infrastructure in Pakistan today. So we ignore at our own peril, and we are not factoring that cost of inaction into any of our actions. So when we make commercial decisions, and Amir is absolutely right that commercial decisions really drive development of new products, they drive development of new plants, of new projects. But what happens when a flood comes and all of that is rendered inoperable or damaged? We are not considering that cost in our actual evaluation. So what happens, right? You look at Pakistan, and this is a very interesting link back to the consumer here, actually. You look at Pakistan, we've had a flood here in Pakistan every year for the last 10 years. And occasionally, every 3-4 years, we have a big one, and we talk about it on the news. We know how much damage that's been done. We know it's going to happen again, but yet it doesn't filter into our sense of calculations. So I think before we go down the path of addressing sustainability, let's look at the cost of not putting in action towards climate adaptation, not mitigation, adaptation. So how do we adapt our infrastructure so that our roads are not swept away, so that our factories are not inoperable, so that our logistics system continues to work, our transmission and distribution lines don't go down, our data and telecom doesn't stop working, because all of that is impacted by the climate elephant that we're seeing in Pakistan's economy today. So I would say it doesn't matter what Trump says, it matters what we're seeing on the ground. So how do we try and address that? And this is interesting that it's not part of the boardroom discussion as yet, but the sustainability standards of reporting are about to come to Pakistan in the next 2 years. And I tell you, we're not ready for that type of disclosure or that type of assessment. And something we've tried to do at InfraZamin is bring that discussion front and center to project development. Because at the end of the day, there's no point in putting up ground-mounted solar if the floods are going to come and damage your solar panels. There's no point in putting up agricultural structures where the floods will destroy the crops anyway. And I think the way we draw our inspiration, and one sort of image that stands out to me over the last 3 weeks that I've seen is a picture of the Wagah border, where on the Indian side, there were the guards, maybe 100 meters apart, no water, and on the Pakistan side, just water everywhere. So, you know, that's simply because India actually invested in flood protection systems. And most countries in the world, and we've had a flood in pretty much every major continent in the last month or so, but the reality is the water goes away quickly, the drainage is effective, but we have not yet gone down that route. So when you look at a project at InfraZamin, we have now started assessing the impact of climate risk within the risk assessment. Because if we don't, and we're a guarantor and we issue guarantees to companies, if there is a climate event and that particular company is unable to pay because of that climate event, then that makes us liable for that debt. So if we don't consider that, then we will not have completed our sort of due diligence in the right way. And I think you will see this now more and more. Part of it will be driven by the sustainability standards that are coming in. But the link back to the consumer is quite simple. My belief is sometimes a consumer doesn't know what they want. I didn't know I wanted a smartphone until they made one. So we can go by consumer wants, but also at the same time, consumer anger when systems fail because of climate events is very much directed at the companies and in the institutions that fail to provide those services. So we come back full circle and we say, okay, how do we mitigate as much climate risk as possible? And how can we build that into the financial forecast of the company? And then finally, the final forward linkage to the customer is, will this service stay uninterrupted to the customer, hence developing my goodwill and my brand value with that customer? So there is a very clear linkage here, and I think we ignore sustainability and we ignore climate and we ignore the impact it has on every aspect of infrastructure and every firm that operates here at our own peril. So more and more, our projects are not just looking at carbon mitigation, which is something all of us know very well. Everybody can put up solar panels, but also what are factories doing to stop water from coming around them, what are subnational, provincial, and federal governments doing to address water drainage and better water reservoir management. And these questions now being asked, we are very happy to say are actually now also being addressed and put into the projects that we're supporting. So I think if we can summarize what we try and do, is we try and create a path to show how something can be done. It doesn't mean we have to do everything down that corridor, but we take that first step and then we show the market how it's done. So if I give you an example, we've always looked at projects from a climate lens, a gender lens, an overall sort of SDG or Sustainable Development Goal lens, which is, are we working towards creating jobs? Are we creating food security? Are we lifting people out of poverty? Are we helping the people and planet? And that's the lens we look at most projects in. Now, a lot of the time, that risk assessment is not familiar to the market. It's not that it can't be done, it's just not familiar. But when we open the door to that, it gives a template or a blueprint for how that can be done, and that can be taken up by the market at a later stage. So if I take the example, very well-known example of how we worked on the gender bond about 2 years ago. Now, we may argue that that was one instance or one instrument, but let's see what's happened in the last 2 years with regards to gender finance in Pakistan. So we did that initial bond, that was about a $12 million sort of guarantee we gave, and opened the door to creating gender-linked financing. Subsequent to that, the British BII, so British Investment Company as well, invested a further $7 million into that institution. That institution then went on to do a $5 million gender-linked bond internationally, which was then fully subscribed. And most recently, we had PMIC do a full gender-linked local financing leg to the microfinance industry. So we never had this kind of gender-linked financing in Pakistan before, but the idea was open a door, show how it's done, and let the rest of the market follow through. And similarly, when we look at climate and we look at renewable energy, for example, the first few distributed solar transactions where you have solar, rooftop solar on commercial institutions or on housing, etc. The first sort of guarantee transaction was actually done by Garanco, which is one of our sister companies. And since then, subsequently, and that was done, the first transaction was about 4 years ago. But if you see the market now on solar financing and how it's progressed, it is now a no-brainer to get into the solar space because it makes commercial sense, but that was first demonstrated through the guarantee product. So this is how you open the doors and create the pathways and show how a particular type of risk assessment can work well at scale. So that's what we try and do, is open that door, and then allow other financial institutions and enable them through capacity building and sometimes even with regulators to show how those can be made sustainable to scale. And that's effectively how we're working through this.